Empire.
Hello and welcome to another live stream edition of the John Conway Report. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Do me a favor, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube later. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there, of course, at Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in and when you join me here for these live streams. Don't forget you can read my work on ESPN.com. We have a one-stop shopping for everybody. If you want to go find out the cuts, we have every team covered on ESPN.com. And of course, I'll have stories throughout the season. You know that. Anyways, today is final cutdown day, and it was a little bit what you expected, right? I don't know that there were any great surprises, but a couple things really stood out. First of all, just some technical stuff to get rid of here first. The waiver wire, they have the number 2 pick, or they're number 2 in the order for the waiver claims. That stays true throughout. It's not, they can pick as many people as they want if they're there at number 2. You have to turn those in. I think the claims are due by noon tomorrow. And then starting after that, they'll probably shortly after that, you'll start to hear, because once you claim somebody, you've got to cut somebody. So you need to be able to let them know that you're going to cut them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it takes a little bit to do that. That's why these guys have been very, very clear at saying this is the initial 53-man roster. Can't tell you how many times over the last week or so that I've heard that this is the initial one. And because of the number 2 spot in the order of the waiver claims, they know they're going to be active. But I think they also know because their roster needs work. Like there are definitely spots where I don't know exactly where they're going to target. I think it's safe to say certain areas need it more. I would say for me, interior O-line, I still want to strengthen that. Cornerback, still got to strengthen that. Look for another receiver possibly. So there are areas where they can go the way. And listen, I would say any position. When you're coming off a 4-13 year, it's the first year of a program, you're going to churn that baby. And speaking of churning, there are only 22 players left over from last year. 22. So that's almost a 60% turnover. Again, not shocking because that's what happens. I think it's also indicative of some of the poor draft classes over the previous 4 years. In fact, just to top that off, 12 draft picks remain from 2020 to 2023. Only 12 are on this roster. And they basically purged the 2023 draft class. I mean, it's 5 of the 7 guys from the draft class last year were cut. Now, I didn't think that was a necessarily great class anyway. I felt like there were a lot of guys that if you know, who are like more long-term developmental type guys, even higher up. The only 2 who remain, Quan Martin, and then who's a solid starter for them, and then Emmanuel Forbes, who still has a lot to prove. Now, you know, somebody asked me on Twitter, it's like, why is he still on the roster? Because he's one of the top 5 corners on the team. It's not that hard. Now, is he a great corner? Well, not. He hasn't proven that. But does he belong on the roster? Yes, he does. And now, you know, so anyways, so that's a couple things there. They did try to trade guys today. They did shop Cole Turner, Ricky Stromberg, both of whom were cut, and then John Ridgway and he's drawn interest for a little while now. In fact, you know, I was a little surprised that they did move him, given that there were a handful of teams that seemed to be interested. I think Washington was sticking to let's say, I believe it was like a 5th round pick, somewhere in that range. Teams weren't offering that, so he's still here. We'll see if he's still here tomorrow, if any team comes up, or if they decide that they pick someone off the waiver wires. But see, the problem now is you pick someone off waiver wire, I don't know that anybody's going to trade for him because you're going to have to cut somebody. So I don't know if they will have lost their chance to trade him or not. But you know, those are the guys that you were really looking at. Would they trade one of those guys? I didn't think Stromberg would get traded. I don't think he showed anything to warrant that. And I think if he hadn't gotten hurt, you could look at it differently. I do think the injury affected his play, and I talked about that on the podcast a few times, and I felt like that was a factor in his performance. And so I didn't think so. Cole Turner, I'm not sure that he really showed anything to warrant being traded. There's usually tight end types you can get out there. But I'll get into more of those in a minute. So anyway, I think what this highlights, the reason why they're at 4-13, the reason why this roster had to be turned over is because the drafting was poor. And some of that goes back to process. And I do believe the process here for the setup and all that, and just knowing who's in charge, who's making the final call, how you're going about doing that, I think is just so much better. This class, I think, will help them. And I think, I'm not surprised that all these guys made it, because that's typically what you're going to do. You're going to keep your guys. But, actually, I have an agent call me now, so I'll have to give him a call in a little bit. But you're going to, that's how you build it, right? But I do like this class. I think there's way more potential for this class than there was, for example, last year. I never thought that was a great class because there were too many guys that I wasn't sure about, right? Like Stromberg, even they had 2 veteran centers ahead of him. That was a luxury pick kind of, right? Braden Daniels, you watch a college tape, and I didn't quite understand the selection. And I like KJ Henry. That one was a surprise to me that he got cut. I felt like he played well enough to warrant a roster spot. They would have ended up keeping 10. Maybe had they traded, Ridgeway, then maybe he gets kept. I don't know. But I did feel like he warranted a spot. It also highlights that I felt like Javonte Jean-Baptiste did a nice job this summer. Like, I really liked how he developed, and he's got the frame that you want at that spot. KJ Henry a little bit more narrow on the shoulders, but I did feel like he did a good job. I mean, I felt like he warranted a spot. Baptiste got the long arms, but I liked the way he played with some strength. So not surprised there. Not really surprised that Andre Jones got cut. So let's go over. So I don't know that in terms of the cuts, was there anything that really surprised me? Not really. Like, I don't know that there's a guy that you could say, like, how did they cut this guy? I didn't see that one coming. I think there are guys that you say, okay, like I said with Henry, okay, yeah, I am surprised by that, but we're still talking a back end of the rotation guy, so you can't really be shocked by anything like that, right? If a starter had been cut, that's something else, but that's not what we're talking about here. Let's go down over some of the positions real quick and just kind of highlight some of the things. Quarterback, Driscoll makes it. He played his way on. I think Sam Hartman is a good shot to be on the practice squad. I'm curious to see what happens with Trace McSorley, because I know they really liked what he did coming in late, playing the way he did the other night on very minimal practice time. I think Buffalo might be another team to watch with him, but I do know they liked what they saw. I mean, Dan Quinn was effusive after the game about him, but I also know that, I've heard some other things beyond that I think that he's got a shot somewhere. I don't know that you keep 2 quarterbacks in the practice squad in addition to having 3 on the roster, but I do think he helped himself in that one game for maybe another team. But again, Driscoll played his way on. Running back, no surprise, Chris Rodriguez out. Didn't think he was going to make it. Didn't really show anything to warrant that. I liked him last year. Not sure of the fit in this system. Kaz Allen was another guy that was talked about for that. And I think you see things there. You say, if you could get this out of him, but to make a roster for a guy like Kaz Allen, you've got to make some plays in the preseason. There really weren't. I think it feels like there's the potential for that big play that just doesn't quite happen. And that's where he's at. So he's got the tools, I think, to make that, which is why I would keep him around in the practice squad to see if it happens, if he develops. But I didn't think he did anything to say you've got to keep him, protect him, because I don't know whether anybody else is going to claim him and put him on the roster. I don't, based on what, right? I think he's got potential. But a lot of guys have potential. And it's funny because the more you talk to people, like, every team has guys that the fan base says or the media says, like, oh, this guy might get claimed. Every team's got that guy. So not all those guys get claimed. And in my time covering this team, I don't remember a time after these final cuts where somebody got claimed by another team where say, oh my gosh, they shouldn't have exposed that guy. It's very, very rare. So anyway, so Kaz, not surprised by him. I think he's worth keeping around. And I could see him being elevated at times, depending on the role they have for him. But I don't think there was really else there. And I think Jeremy McNichols was working as the 3rd running back all spring and all summer. Not a surprise there. But I would look to bolster that spot through waiver claims. We'll see what happens. Receiver, Martavis Bryant, not a surprise. I know he had the nice 4th quarter the other night, but you have to he's got the size, he's got the speed. He hasn't played since 2018. He just got here. So would he warrant a spot? No, not based on those factors. There's a lot there. Does he have talent? Yeah, of course. That's why he got the shot after not having played in the NFL for that long because of suspension. but it takes more than that. And you have to, again, perspective, which is he's facing guys who weren't going to make the roster. And that's not to diminish what he did, because I think it was good to see that for him, but it's also, that's how teams are going to look at it, right? So the thought and I talked about this a few times, when they signed him, the thought was that most likely practice squad guy, let him learn the offense, let Washington see what he can still offer. Then you can do something with him. I think he's worth keeping around in that capacity. And if nothing else, as he's doing that, it gives the defensive backs a guy with size and speed that they have to now defend against. So, I don't think he showed much in practice or in the Miami game to say, like, all right, it's coming. So, I think people have to have some perspective on his situation and why it is. I know he has a great deal of urgency, but I don't know that anybody else does when it comes to him. He was on the street for a long time. The fourth quarter of a final preseason game isn't going to change other teams' opinions at this point. So anyways, it's not to demean him. I'm just trying to provide perspective on what the reasoning behind some of these moves would be. Bryson Tremaine, tough one, big. He had a good camp, made some good plays. Mitchell Tinsley, good camp, made some plays. They can both help on special teams. Tremaine has more size. Tinsley can work more in the slot. But, Tinsley had a couple of drops in practice that, could have helped him. I don't know that they would necessarily hurt him as much as they could have helped him if you make it contested kind of catches. Tremaine, not a burner guy that's always going to hold him back, but I think those are the kind of guys that just have to keep plugging away, because I think eventually they're going. Well, Tinsley was on the roster last year, but eventually you're going to get your chance and then see what you can do if you keep plugging, because they both offer enough in other areas that you say, okay, let's see. So anyways, tight end, Turner, not a surprise. Just the play strength just isn't there when you watch him. And they really like Colson Yankoff. And I don't know if you heard Dan Quinn talking about him today. He and Tyler Owens mentioned both and said that, like, he said you could feel their intensity, you could feel their speed. And I agree. For both of them. Owens, you felt it big time. With Yankoff, you could see it. You had to focus more a little different areas in special teams and just his blocking, but you could see it. And he's a converted tight end too, quarterback, running back, receiver in college. So he's a guy that's worth developing. You're going to develop as a fourth tight end. That's the kind of guy you have. He's going to have a higher ceiling than Turner, and he can help you. He can run. He can help you in the special teams area as well. Turner did play a lot of special teams. That was the one thing. I almost put him on my projected 53 for that reason, but I'm like, I just didn't think so. And so I took him off and put Jeff Driscoll on because he played his way onto it. Missed on a few other guys, but those two ones I got right.
Hey, it's Bram Weinstein here, voice of the Commanders, and of course, frequent guest of this podcast, the John Keim Report. I wanted to let you all know that my show, which airs at 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. on ESPN 630, is now exclusively produced by Empire Media, my company, and is going to be distributed through our network. So I'm asking you, please, if you subscribe to this show and love this show, give mine a try as well. Subscribe to the Bram Weinstein Show wherever you get your podcasts, and many of the shows and many of the elements that are in the show will be available on the Empire Media YouTube channel. We're going to talk a ton of Commanders and other DC sports. Check it out.
All right, now let's go to someone I got wrong. Offensive line. I had Julian Jones on. They did not. Their word matters more than mine. But I will say I had him on initially, but I didn't think throughout practice, throughout camp, that really anybody in that backup group really distinguished themselves. That's why I think there's still some issues there that they're going to have to address. But he's versatile, but it's not. Trent Scott sticking around, a little bit of a surprise. Didn't think he really had a great camp, but they want guys who can play tackle and guard, and that's what he can do. So he offers you that. Same with Chris Paul. Not a surprise at all. I actually think Chris Paul did a really nice job at tackle over the last couple of games. So I'd like to see more of how he develops there. Maybe he's a guy that next year can go in and take that spot. Who knows? But I do think he did a nice job throughout the summer working at that spot. In addition to he can play guard, but I kind of like him more at tackle in this offense. I don't know, like guards, you need to pull a little bit more in this offense. I don't know that that's going to be his strength necessarily, but I liked what I saw there, so that's why he's sticking around. So let's see. Braden Daniels, no surprise there. There were a couple of times in against the I think it was Dolphins that he had a couple of nice pulls. I think the consistency just wasn't there. I think he's a guy that not a good draft pick. There you go. Let's move on. Defensive line. I went over that with KJ Henry and Andre Jones. More surprised by Henry. Jamin Davis sticking around, not a surprise. Been telling you that all along. That and not just me, others, and they like how he's progressed. So if you're gonna have a guy like Davis who's still developing, you have Jean Baptiste who's still developing, and you feel like they can get to a higher point. That's why Henry's going to be gone, and they're not. So in defensive tackle, that's where let's go to Ridgeway and Mathis, because that's one where for a while, again, Ridgeway drew interest, and he's still here with two of them, and I like what he offers. I will say I felt like Mathis did better over the last two games than he had previously. So I think there's some sense could he offer you a little bit more penetration. Quinn wants guys in that middle who can penetrate. I think a lot of that pass rush is going to come from there with Allen and Payne and Newton especially. So who can help you there? He typically does not keep those big body types, and that's what both these guys are. That's why who knows how this is going to look tomorrow at this time. But right now, that's what you got there. So I'm a little surprised there. But I also think with Newton, so Johnny Newton makes it. He's not going on IR or anything like that. But he hasn't done anything. Like, we have no clue what this guy's going to do. So in some ways, you kind of need to keep that extra defensive tackle right now, because who's your third? Like, you can't just assume Newton's going to go out there next week we'll see if he's even practicing tomorrow. I don't know. But let's say, if next week's his first week of practice, kind of hard to put him in a game for many snaps, if any. He hasn't been working, so it's awfully difficult. So you need to have more depth there, at least for the short term, because you don't have until Newton's back and ready and not so much ready, but until he's back into a better play mode, then I think it's going to be difficult. So. And he wasn't going to go on IR because he's not. He's getting healthy, and there's no reason to put him on IR because you can still use him in a game, even if it's just for a handful of snaps. But you need depth there, so that makes sense that they would do that. Linebacker, Anthony Pittman, gone. Not really overly surprised by that. I didn't have him on my 53. I felt like they'd go with Walker and obviously the two starters. I had Dominique Hampton there, and that's where, he's a big guy who can run. He's going to help on special teams. And then they list Dante Fowler as a linebacker. So I always consider him a defensive end because that's kind of where he rushes, but they list him as a linebacker. So there you go. But and then Jordan McGee going to short-term IR. So the new change this year is you could put two guys on IR at the same time as final cuts. In the past, you'd have to put them on after the final cuts. So you'd have to expose somebody to waivers first. Well, now you just put them at the same time. So he'll be out 4 weeks. And I think I told you the other day, I didn't think it was going to be. The feeling is that it's a 4 to 6 week injury, which would cause him to miss possibly 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of the season. But you put him on the short-term IR, it gives you the chance to keep depth at defensive tackle while Johnny Newton works his way back into more playing shape. So let's see. What else we got here? Say cornerbacks, only 5. That surprised me a little bit because typically Dan Quinn has kept 6. So that one, I wouldn't be surprised if they look for someone there. They cut Tariq Castro-Fields, they cut Chig Anuzium. You can bring Chig Anuzium back. You can bring them both back if they're still there, but you can certainly I think Anuzium would make it there. Castro-Fields, we'll see. I think Anuzium can help you on special teams probably a little bit more. But there you go. So then let's see, safety, a big surprise at the start of camp, or even I would say, even going into camp, I like this guy because I felt like he showed up in the spring too. But Tyler Owens is the guy the undrafted guy who makes the big story. And, it's funny because I know they're kind of saying you don't want to there's some guys who aren't going to be there tomorrow. And I can't imagine they take him off the active roster. He played his way on. If a guy like Yankoff or somebody who's maybe hasn't shown quite as much in games, but the team really likes, I could see them maybe getting shifted to the practice squad after tomorrow. But Owens has earned it, and Owens plays his ass off, and Owens is going to help you on special teams, period, end of sentence. And then you can develop him into that big hybrid role that Jeremy Chin plays. And I'm also glad, the one guy I'm happy for is Derek Forrest. because I wasn't sure if he was going to make it. In my 53, I did not have mine because I had 6 corners, only 5 safeties. But he was a hard one for me because I like how he plays. He's physical, he's tough. So I think I always felt like he was a good fit for the mentality of this new regime. And I'm happy to see him make it. He had a couple injuries, had the injury last year, had a couple injuries this summer. Wasn't sure, but he can help you, so that's why he's on. So anyway, that's a big thing for me. Let's see what else I got here. I don't know as far as like waiver claims guys are going to go after. I know there's some interesting ones. I know like Allen Robinson, veteran receiver, got cut. I don't know that he's a guy that's going to come in. If you're looking at a guy who's at the back end of your receiver roster, they have to play special teams, and that's not really what he does. I think is Tim Patrick from Denver is a guy that I know the Broncos tried to trade him. Has some good speed. I talked to our reporter out there, Jeff Legwald. Loves the guy, thinks he's great in the locker room, tough dude, but he may have a couple suitors. The only problem is he hasn't played in a couple years. He had an ACL and then an Achilles injury. That's a tough one, but we'll see what happens there. So Caleb Farley, the corner from Tennessee, too many injuries. And I think, he's a big guy, but just too many injuries. I don't know that there's a lot of guys that were in Dallas. I was talking to our Dallas reporter, if there's anybody that he thinks would tempt Dan Quinn. He doesn't think so, but you never know. So, and same with Adam Peters out in San Francisco. Not like there's like some obvious names you say, watch this guy. So, but I think you have to watch positions, and I think that's what you have to look for. So, anyways, let's get to some of your questions or just comments. So, and Neil M is like, what did Kaz ever do? I think what Kaz did is he would show the quickness. You could see it in practice. You could see it. On some returns, whatever. But you just didn't see it in the preseason games. And one of the troubling things for me, he had the ball security issues last year. I felt like he was a little bit better there, just the way he caught the ball. However, he had one run up the middle, and he had a couple of nice runs, but nothing that just like was electric that you just said, wow. You could see that little slithering ability. But the one, he covered the ball with 2 hands. He still got a strip. Got to work on that. So I think it's good for him to work on for him to work on the practice squad, get that squared away. And speaking of it, because like the other thing, early in camp, Dan Quinn mentioned him was one of the top guys he mentioned as a possible kick returner, along with Mike Samerstill. Well, that's where Byron Pringle is going to make it too. So, I don't know who's necessarily going to be the kick returners. I would almost Byron Pringle. That's why he's on this roster, assuming he's still there. But then also a guy that I would look for, maybe Mike Samerstill. Like I really like him, and I think they so we'll see. And then No Dice says they have Forbes at cornerback 1. No, they don't. So I don't know how that's going to look right now, but I think let's say there's just as good a chance that they just go with St. Just, and then Samerstill is out 2 main corners, and then when you go to nickel, you bring in Forbes and you put Samerstill inside. That's a possibility. I don't know how that's going to look. But, they were pleased with the way, with some of what they saw from Forbes. Listen, we know he's got to get better. We know he's got to improve in some of the fundamentals and techniques. But they liked that he was a little bit more physical than, coming up against the run, but as physical as he could be. And then I hope this is the real Doc Walker. If it is, shout out to my guy. He's the best. One of the best things about covering this team is getting to know guys like Doc Walker, B. Mitch, all those kind of guys. So let's see. We have Matt wants to know, assuming they pick up 1 to 2 guys off the waiver wire, who will they cut to make room, yank off? Well, that just depends on the position they go to, right? Because I don't know. Like, I think the positions that I would target, if it were me, I'm always looking offensive line. You can't not look at that. And I just don't think they have the kind of depth that you need to survive 70 games at this point. And I'm not sure that Michael Dieter had the greatest camp, but at least he's a veteran, right? And so I don't know that I would feel settled inside necessarily. So I think I would look for some of those areas, but then, I don't know who they would cut there. And if you look at the back end guys, like, Yankoff I mentioned this, but Yankoff would be a guy that you look at just because I don't know that another team's going to pick him up and put him on their 53. I do know they really like him though, and so it would surprised me a little bit if they cut him, because he can also help on special teams. And I know you can elevate guys, but I think that, so there's a role for him. But I think you'd look at that and wonder, I don't think they would. I think they will stick with 3 quarterbacks, partly because Mariota missed the last couple of weeks with the groin issue. So how is he there? And so is he strong enough with that they feel comfortable enough then going with 2? And I don't think so right now. So I think you're going to stick with 3 for right now. Yeah, and so he is, as Sam Howe points out in the comments over here, he is security with Mariota being hurt. And that's a better way to put it than I just blathered on, but he is security. And I think it's good if I'm assuming they're going to put Hartman on the practice squad. And it's, by the way, it's a 16-member practice squad, but they also get the 17th from the international player, whom they also cut today. And so they'll have 17 on the practice squad. And it's funny because the practice squad is so much different than it used to be. It really, anymore, it's as much an extension of the roster as ever been, because you can elevate guys off that. So you really want to make sure you have a good one. But I would keep Hartman on the practice squad and develop him, because I felt like he showed enough to do that. Timothy Parks, well, no. He says he would have kept McSorley over Driscoll. No. No. McSorley had a nice, again, preseason, but he just, no. I like McSorley. I like the way he plays. I like his attitude. But no. You have no. I don't even have to explain that. So, and there was more on Johnny Newton. Isn't Newton dealing with a soft tissue injury? Yes, he is, and he also had the foot injury that he was recovering from, but it's been more the soft tissue injury. The problem is you just don't get reps, and so the soft tissue injuries are always very tricky. And I think that's why they kept extra defensive tackles in there, to have more bodies in there. And if you're looking at who are the best tackles after that, well, those are the guys, Mathis and Ridgeway, even though they may not exactly fit what Quinn wants to do, but they are legitimate backup defensive tackles in the NFL. But I don't know, like the problem that I have for Newton is he hasn't been on the field. So he hasn't worked with these guys. So he may be able to go in there and have a couple of rushes and do a couple things, but he's just not. I think it's going to be a couple weeks before he can really contribute. He's got to get back into play shape. So Sean Garner says bring Martavis back. I think they would. I mean, again, I kept hearing that. But I do think that a lot of people went way overboard with what the extrapolation was extreme. I'll just say that. And so I think it's good. He may not like it. His people may not like it. I think it's good for him. And maybe somebody else picks him up. I'd be surprised, only because he was out there 2 weeks ago and nobody touched him. Now, maybe you watch him a little bit and say, okay, you saw something that sparks your interest. I don't know that would happen. But, again, we're still talking about a guy who hasn't played in the NFL since 2018. That's a long, long time. So that's why I say get on the practice squad, get into a system, learn the offense, get out there and show all that you can do. I think it's hard. I would be very impatient if I were him. But I think, like, from the team perspective, that was kind of always the plan. I never really thought he was going to make it. So, that's not why, I'm not surprised that he was cut. But I would also put him on the practice squad and just see. So there you go. Let's see what else we got up here. Yeah, we went over. Oh, Bram.
What's up?
For the entire month of August, the Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is offering multiple ways to save on climbing and zip lining and 50% off axe throwing. There are only a few Sundays left without football, so it's time to get that last summer adventure on the schedule. There's no better place to spend the last few days and nights of the summer with friends and family. Don't just take our word for it. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring was named the #1 aerial adventure park in North America by USA Today. Anytime you're thinking about reaching new heights, make sure you know before you go. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is the only ACCT accredited park in Maryland or Virginia. So there you have it, folks. For the rest of the summer, you can get the best climbing, zip lining, and axe throwing in the country up to 50% off right here in the DMV. Reserve your adventure today at www.theadventurepark.com/Kime.
I'm joined by Bram Weinstein, the voice of Commanders. This is like a big surprise party.
Surprise.
Look at this. Hey, I was not expecting this. I feel like I'm a guest host, and there's like some famous dude just walked on stage. Come on and sit down on the couch, Bram.
I just want to say hi. I saw you were doing this thing, so I wanted to say hi.
Well, let me get. These guys have heard my thoughts on everything. What are your thoughts on today? Anything? What jumped out at you the most, if anything?
I wasn't really surprised by much. I thought, I'm sure you were reporting on Cole Turner, so I wasn't really sure what was going to happen there. I never really, I know because Martavis Bryant had a really, great fourth quarter and a great night. Like I thought for, I gave it like a 10% that he would, be on the initial 53, but I never really put a lot of stock into that. But I'd like to see him on the practice squad, honestly. I think that'd be cool. But outside of that, like, I don't know, nothing really overly surprised me. I know, I'm sure a lot's being made of how many draft picks from a year ago got released. So,
that was a big thing for me, is exactly that. And where would you, all right, you're GM now. Look at the waiver wire. What are the spots that you would target?
Well, so I thought this a few days ago, because like they were trying to profile Kaz Allen and they were moving him to like running back. And I think they're looking for overall explosiveness. So I actually think running back, I kind of feel, and now that Wiley and Rodriguez and Austin Jones were not kept on the initial 53-man roster, and I assume at least one of them is going to end up, going to the practice squad. And my guess would be Wiley. Like, I still think that's a spot that I'm watching pretty closely here. I feel like, honestly, that they are probably in need of explosive players. And I think this is why they were looking at Kaz Allen the way they were looking at him. I think they're looking for some people that are dynamic potential playmakers. And, they don't have a lot of that like top end speed type players. So I'm watching, closely here, especially at like running back or even receiver. Like if something pops up that like they feel like improves their overall level of potential explosiveness, I could see that. And considering that Wiley was not retained for the initial 53-man roster, it felt like I'm kind of on it. Like I feel like they're looking for potentially another running back to come in here.
I think that's a good spot too, and I agree with that. And you're right. Like that's what they kept talking about with Kaz Allen, was exactly that, like explosive. And they like somebody who can play, again, not like Deebo Samuel, but that role of Deebo Samuel, the guy who can go run out of the backfield, can line up in the slot and catch some passes for you too. That adds another little element to the offense. And I think that's one thing they were looking for to see from him. And so I'd keep him around, but I'd definitely look for somebody else there as well. I think you're right on that.
Yeah, that one, I'll keep an eye on receivers. Obviously, I think like that's worth watching here. And then I think it goes without saying that like if there are offensive linemen inside or outside that pop up that they feel like potentially could be an upgrade, mainly as backups, then I think that's an obvious potential maneuver. I felt this way for a couple of weeks now. 3 to 5 players on the eventual final roster have not been on their roster. So I still feel like there's a lot of things to do here. And Quinn's been open about it. I mean, he has said, we're not done maneuvering. I mean, he's been open about that part. He's not saying what they're trying to do, but he's been open about that. So I do expect movement to happen over the next 24, 48 hours for sure. And then, as teams maneuver things, and after week 1, they make some decisions about people as well. So I think we're a good couple of weeks away from really seeing what the initial real roster looks like.
It's Wednesday's practice before the Tampa Bay game. That's when your team is set, because there's that's the only thing, like nowadays, like there's so much time between the final cuts and then that first game that there's a lot of time for teams to maneuver things. So it's really, I'd say tomorrow at this time you can feel pretty good, but it's really next Wednesday when that's when you're getting the game check, right? But that's when you're really on the roster because you can still maneuver a little bit. So are you still surprised Jaden made the roster? You were wondering about him, weren't you?
Jamin or Jaden?
Jaden.
Jaden? No, I assumed he was good. Yeah,
Okay.
I thought he'd be fine.
Okay. Jamin Davis, what did you think about him sticking around and then just what you saw from him at defensive end? And that spot, Bram, was the one with KJ Henry going. I was a little bit surprised by him because I thought, but that spot in particular, but within Jamin's development.
Yeah, I think, both KJ Henry and Andre Jones being released, mild surprise that they used the 7th round pick on Javonte Jean-Baptiste. And he actually had some really nice moments in the preseason, and he's a little bit longer and bigger. I thought that's where I thought Andre was going to have a hard time. That's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
With KJ though, I thought I that's probably the most surprising one to me. That was the play. I didn't expect that to happen. With Jamin, the coaches have said over and over about him. They appreciate, one, he's a tremendous athlete. Everybody knows that. So 2, and this cannot be overlooked here. Like, if he leaves after this season and he signs somewhere else and he has a decent season, there's a compensatory pick that goes along with him. So like there's value attached to him to having him here. And I believe, that I'll listen to the coaches on this because they were very effusive about what he's done, how hard he's worked, how appreciative they are. This isn't, some guys do not want to do things like this. He's been open arms to do it. I talked to him a couple weeks ago. He was saying things like, come on, I want this. I want to get my career on track. They're going to make me better. He believes in it. He's buying into it. And, I think their linebacking core, while I think is, far stronger than it was a year ago, I wouldn't describe it as deep. So there's an if there's an injury there, to move him back to linebacker, I think is obvious too. So I'm not surprised, that he's here at all. And about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I'm like, short of some kind of development around somebody that I'm not looking at closely, I just don't see where he was not going to make the team. I never thought he wasn't going to make the team, but I am a little surprised at KJ Henry. That's probably the biggest name that I'm surprised by.
Right. And I think the other thing that, to me, and for ESPN, we always have to do like the big move. I don't know that there was one big move, but what to me was the gutting of the 2023 draft class, Bram. That wasn't so much a big move as much it was a symbolic move, and it just highlights the problems that they've had here. I mean, there have been a couple guys where you say, "Oh, this is a good pick. This is a good pick. This is a good pick." But man, the totality of those 4 drafts are why this franchise is in this spot right now, and that symbolized it.
Yeah, I mean, it really obviously stands out. It is an indictment of the players that were picked here. I'll never forget when Adam Peters did his first press conference and he was asked about the roster, and he took this very elongated, pregnant pause, and it was just so obvious, that like he was going to make changes. To what degree, I didn't know. And it became pretty clear early. I'm like, we're going to have 30 new players on this team, like 30. And that is an enormous amount. With Rodriguez, I would just say it was hard for me to see him fitting in this scheme. So I think it's not that I don't think there's a talent thing with him. I actually think with him that he's probably not the exact right fit of the type of players that they're looking for here. I think they want guys that are going to catch the ball out of the backfield a lot. Right. And I'm not sure that he kind of fits that role for them. So that one I think is a scheme thing. And I think he'll find a home somewhere else. KJ Henry, I'm surprised by. Jones, once they drafted Jean-Baptiste, was going to be hard. I mean, we kind of knew, and Jamin moved to edge. It was going to be hard. So like he got caught up, and he's 7th round pick. So like he got caught up in that. Stromberg, I mean, the writing's been on the wall for months with him because he wasn't even the backup center throughout the spring and the summer. And once that was happening, it was hard to figure where he fit in. So that one didn't work out. And who am I missing? Who was the other one that they released?
At defensive end? At end?
Henry, Jones, Rodriguez, Stromberg.
From the draft class, Braden Daniels.
Braden Daniels. Well, Braden Daniels, geez, I mean, he was a project last year. They knew that last year. Yeah. Then he got hurt. and they had to stick him on IR. And then you turn around with all this change, he was going to have to be immensely way ahead of the schedule to convince the coaching staff to give him a real second chance here. So I think he got caught up in change. I mean, like, that was one of those when they drafted him, they openly told us, they're like, he's a project, we're going to be working with him. And then, you have a regime change, you get caught up in things like that.
So one question real quick. Mecco Calderon wants to know, is Brandon Coleman going to be ready for week 1? I think he will be. I don't know that he starts. And this is why you have Cornelius Lucas too, Bram, because he can go in and start for you. You don't need Coleman to be your day 1 starter. Lucas has experience. You can get through games with him. So, but that'll give Coleman time to get ready. But based on when we talked to Dan Quinn, we asked him about it last week, it did sound like he would be ready. So, but a big day is tomorrow. Like, we'll be out there tomorrow and we'll see, is he practicing or not? And not just, he's been kind of working, just not full pads. So is he there Thursday or whatever? So that's going to be, but even if he's not, Cornelius Lucas is okay for right now. That's why you have Lucas.
I think that is a real question that needs to be asked of Dan Quinn. Like, are you comfortable playing him week 1 against Todd Bowles' defense, without having a single snap in the preseason? And, I'd like to see how he answers that question. This is assuming that he's good to go. And I think he will be. I don't know this for sure, but I think he will be. Like, he was back in pads last week. I think they were being careful with him in the final preseason game. And they had kind of hinted if this was a regular season, they felt he'd be able to go. So I feel like that's going to happen. But I also want to say this one final thing just on the Ron draft classes and everything. Chris Paul's carryover too. Chris Paul was asked to go play tackle. Chris Paul did enough to make the team, so like it wasn't all of them across the board. And
sure,
like,
no. There were definitely some. Listen, Quan Martin is a good pick. Like, I like Quan Martin.
Pick. B-Rob's a great pick. Cosme's turned out to be a really great pick. I know they initially thought he'd be a tackle. He's turning into a Pro Bowl guard. Like, so it's not like all of them turned out to be,
right.
Poor picks.
But the problem is you're in this spot because the high picks, not enough of them turned out. So, and that's a big thing. And that, like, the other, somebody wants to know why they kept McNichols over Wiley. Well, McNichols has been with a lot of teams, man. He's got the experience, but he was working because I think there's a little bit more versatility with him right now and the experience. You can put Wiley on the practice squad. I don't see anybody picking him up. By the way, and I want to give a shout out to Loft TM because he is working for us, Bram. He's trying to get us some viewers and some likes and all that. And he's right. I am not YouTube savvy. There is no doubt about that. There's not a single person that knows me that would disagree with that statement, but I appreciate the work you're putting in on our behalf.
I appreciate that too. And I'm also, I'm popping on here too to shill for myself.
I was just going to say, you got to plug it. Go ahead, plug it.
I moved my show to Empire Media too. It still airs on ESPN 630 at 11 to 12, but the podcast is now run by Empire Media. I'm really happy that happened. And we've grown exponentially in a very short period of time. We went from 0 to pretty good, but I'm here to tell you to please, since you all enjoy my visits here in general on John's show, you could check out my show too. And it helps all of us. We're all part of the same family here. So check out the Bram Weinstein Show, please.
It absolutely does. And so then we'll just go a couple more here. Kevin Hayes says, do you think overall this is a competitive team? I think it's competitive. How good they are, I don't know. But competitive to me is it's mindset. It's how you're approaching things. And the one thing Dan Quinn talked about too is find the identity this year. Now, you want to win games. Like, the identity you want is a winning team. But how do you get to that point? That's when you create that identity. Now, you can create an identity being physical, tough, competitive, right? And that can also result in wins right away. But that's what you need to find. To me, this year is as much about that. But I do think they'll be more competitive, Bram. I think the mindset is a lot better. I think this franchise is just in a different mental spot with the players that they were even here. So I think they'll be more competitive. I don't know yet how good they'll be because there's still so much to see and know. And by the way, speaking of Coleman too, my problem isn't so much is he going to be healthy for week 1. It's is he mentally ready to play in an NFL game in week 1 when you've missed a lot of time in training camp. It's just really hard for a rookie. So, I think that's when someone else wanted to know too about who's the starting slot receiver. Is it Zacchaeus or McCaffrey? Bram, my opinion on this is it really depends on the game. And, starting slot receiver, you could have a package in the first series that features Zacchaeus more, or maybe you have a first package that features McCaffrey more. You can rotate. That was part of what they were talking about is I think the versatility they have with that group to be able to do that. And I think it just depends. They're different type of slot receivers. That's how I would answer that. I don't know if you have any different opinion on that.
Just a guess on this. You're going to see McCaffrey a lot in the slot. I think you're going to see Zacchaeus and Diami on the outside a lot across from McLaurin. And that's what I think. I think the other thing too, that I think to point out about the receivers because of who they kept. There's a profile here, obviously. They tough guys, going to block downfield, be very physical players. Go watch Byron Pringle, and plus kick returns helped him too. Go watch how he plays. Very physical. Diami Brown, very physical player, willing participant on special teams. Like McCaffrey, tough player too. Football guy. So I think, my gut says McCaffrey's in the slot a lot. And that Zacchaeus and Brown kind of rotate in and out, mainly on the outside, but Zacchaeus clearly can work in the slot too. So that's my gut on that one. And as far as them being a competitive team, I'm counting on that. Now, I think we can all be realistic and go, we can see the potential issues with the roster and that it's all new. It's baked in that it's going to be up and down a little bit here. But from a competitive standpoint, I'm buying it. And I will point to, I don't know if you saw this too, but at the end of these preseason games, McSorley trucking a corner and the sidelines engaged going crazy. Tressway running down and throwing his body around for no reason whatsoever, but did it anyway. The place is going crazy. There's just a different feel, vibe, the whole thing. What Quinn and Witt and all those guys have been talking about, you're going to like how we play. We're going to bring it every week. I see that. I'm hearing it at practice. I feel it. Are they literally together enough and good enough at this level to win a lot of games? That's to be seen. But will they be competitive? Yeah. I'm convinced of that. I have a feeling we're going to be heading towards December and we're going to be going, boy, they win this one, they got a shot at the wild card. I have a feeling we're going to be talking like that this year.
And my thing too is one thing I think they've done well. Sometimes teams draft or sign guys and they want to be a smart, tough, physical team. And then they draft or sign guys that don't necessarily fit those characteristics. Seen that a lot. I think what they did here is they did what they did well. One of the things they did well was finding guys who fit that sort of football character profile. And I think that's what you see with that, right? I think it's McSorley came off the street. Kingsbury knows him, but it's the attitude that I think a lot of these guys play with. I think you see it at practice. So I think that's one of the things that does well. If you want a smart, tough, physical team, you draft smart, tough, physical players. And I think that's one of the things they did. I do want to answer the last question, Bram. I'm going to answer this real quick because Shane, I think it's a good question from Shane. Do I feel Forrest is through the clear yet? 6 safeties is a ton. And he said, I've seen more from Forrest than Butler. Well, they've seen more from Butler. Butler has worked as a third safety the entire spring and summer. He plays a specific role. He can cover in the slot. They like his versatility. I don't think it's between those. I don't think it'd be between those two. As far as Forrest goes, though, I don't know. That's a good question. I bring it up because one of the things Quinn talked about last week is with this new kickoff rule, possibly needing to keep more safeties than you have in the past because the style of kickoff, the style of player they're looking for, guys who can move in space really well, and that's what safeties do. So if he stays, you can point to maybe that as a factor. But yeah, I don't know that there's some of those back end guys. Nobody's safe right now, Bram. So
I really thought that position group was going to be that and interior defensive line were going to be the toughest decisions to make because there are viable NFL players there that they were going to have to decide whether they were going to keep or release. So in the end, Ridgeway and Mathis both making it. I felt like going into it, I'm like, they're going to have to pick between the two. And that's a very difficult choice. And you were reporting for a while. I know people were reporting that they were looking on the market with Ridgeway and fielding offers. I guess they didn't get anything that they liked. And, why would you release him then? And I feel the same way about safety. There are a couple of guys there. So to the point of, are they in the clear? I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I'm not totally sure. But they kept good football players because they didn't want to just release them. And I think those were kind of two spots where they had too many viable NFL players and kind of got stuck in a position where are we just going to let them go? you know, like, and I guess they decided let's not do that.
There you go. So Bram, this is the longest live stream I think we've had. We're going to be doing
Sorry about that.
No, that was great. Listen, hey, you gave the fans a treat because I didn't have to blabber on anymore. I had someone in there who could. It was great. So, anyways, but we're going to be doing this every Tuesday night, from here on out, the end of the season. So everybody can tune in for that, and we'll be wrapping up games, and we'll be talking about games, talking about Jaden Daniels. Going to be a lot to talk about. I'm looking forward to this year just because it's new and it's fresh, and that's always invigorating for everybody. So anyway, Bram, thanks for hopping on. Thanks to everybody for tuning in and for asking the questions, leaving the comments. Always appreciate it. I'll talk to you next time. Oh, by the way, I'll be back on Friday. I'll be back on Thursday morning talking about some stuff from Wednesday, but also Friday morning with B. Mitch, talking some really good stuff with B. Mitch. That'll be coming out Friday. So tune in then, and I'll talk to you next time.